Welcome to Small Arms Solutions Crime Series. Today we're looking at the Ruger P85. The P85 was manufactured by Sturm Ruger. Now, if you go back to when these guns were first produced in 1985, Ruger was considered the gun of the working class. It was rugged, manufactured at a very inexpensive price, but it was something that anybody could afford, a good, reliable handgun at a good price. They've made a lot of use of investment casting into receivers, although this particular rifle here uses the polymer frame. The original pistols utilized an investment cast type frame, relatively large, bulky. They were not as durable as they were touted to be. I had seen them break before, and I'd seen them crack before, but they were inexpensive. You're looking at a $300 gun pretty much back in the late 80s, early 90s. So again, 1985 to 2013 was when it was produced. Because of the low price on here, this was obviously a gun choice for criminals, due to the fact that it was something that was cheap, go from place to place. It worked very good with ball ammunition, and even some of the hollow points it worked very well with. It was a little bit on the bulky side compared to some of the other guns that we looked at. So for as far as 9mm full-size pistols is concerned, this is certainly one of the most popular were the Ruger series. So we're going to go over this particular pistol and see what the details of it are. First off, we have a double action, single action. So we have a safety, similar to that of the Beretta, which when the safety is engaged, the trigger is disconnected. Engage it. Your first shot's the long drawn double action pull. Then it goes into single shot. So you would use this as a decocker or flip it up and you would have it basically as a revolver. And it was ambidextrous. Now, as you can see, we have an ambidextrous magazine release. It's on both sides. We have a slide release here as well. As you can see, the serial number is basically a plate that's molded into the plastic. This was very common for us to see these removed. And of course, because these were steel plates, most of the time they didn't know what they were doing, so we had a very good success rate at being able to restore those. Now, the investment casts, those were also very easily restored as well. Again, if you don't know specifically how to remove it, we were able to do it. Now, the magazines, 15-shot magazines. These pistols came in different calibers, 9mm, 40, and 45. We'll talk about some of those other models in a little bit. Typical Browning short recoil. Lock back on the last shot. Now, for disassembly, these are sort of weird because you had a little lever here that you have to pull down to disengage that. And now we would align it with the notch. Push outward, come right out, and pulls right off. And again, this one here it's linkless. And there's your barrel. Now, machining, quite crude. Lots of machining marks that we're seeing in here. Again, this is not a SIG or a Beretta where you expected to see that really, really high quality. Now, the P85, the non-polymer frames, they had a link on here that was very similar to that of a 1911, but it's still engaged from the front. You didn't have the 2 on the top, so it was still a modified Browning linkless. The frame, as you can see, is this particular here is polymer. You can see here, this is the ejector that we have to push down to disengage for disassembly and reassembly. And then once you have it back together, just by sticking a magazine in there, it re-engages that and it's ready to go again. So reassembly, you drop them right back in, right back in. Of course, we have the cam end upward. Make sure our disengaged. Insert. And then, of course, we pop the magazine in and engages it. Quality, as I said, not that great, but when using ball ammunition, they were fairly reliable. Now, what they did have was a firing pin safety, which is the most important safety you can possibly ask for on one of these type of a pistol. So if it's dropped, it will not go off. Trigger is extremely squishy. As you can see, there's a lot of take up. Then for reset, you can see we got to go quite a ways forward to hit the reset. And back at it again. Now, we look at cartridges for this. We look at 4 different cartridges. We have the 7.62 by 21, which was the P89. 9mm by 19, P85, P89, P93, P94, P95. 40 S&W, P91 and P94. 45 Auto, P89, P90, P97, and P345. Magazine capacity, again, 9mm 15 plus 1, 40 was 10 plus 1 or 12 plus 1, and then the 45 was 7 plus 1 or 8 plus 1. Now, in 1984, the P85 was submitted for the trials for the XM9 program. And that's not this model. This is the one that had the investment cast frame on it. Did not fare very well. Did not make it to the 20,000 round endurance test. And not to mention, when it was looked at, this was barely what they would consider the quality for law enforcement. So this was really a commercial handgun, not really meant for law enforcement or military use. And the police, again, very, very minimal use of this was ever used of the Ruger pistols. They did have some fun cameos in movies like True Lies, but other than that, not much. But again, the MSRP of the P85 around 1990, that era, was about $295. The P89 was introduced in 2009. It was offered in all three calibers, 7.62 by 21, 9mm, as well as the 40 S&W. And that was introduced in 1992 and discontinued in 2009. In 1991, they introduced their first 45, the P90. Now, that one we saw quite a bit of in the labs, too. It was funny because it was a very, very big pistol. Same size as this 45, it only held, 7 or 8 rounds. But we did see those quite a bit. And I do have to say they were sort of nice to shoot. The recoil wasn't too bad on them. But again, for as far as accuracy and reliability, it just didn't have it. And the next one introduced was the P91, which is 40 S&W. Again, that was the first time they had offered a pistol in that caliber. Those did not seem to be nearly as popular, because if you go back to the time period of 1994 or 95 when the 40 caliber came out, everybody and their brother was making a 40 caliber pistol because it was the hot thing, and it was the point that was everybody in law enforcement was switching over to it, so it was quite popular. Short-lived, only for 2 years it was produced. 1994, the P93, which is the compact version of this pistol, if you really want to call it compact. It certainly was still a large pistol. It's at a 3.9-inch barrel. 1994, the P94 was introduced. Chambered in 9mm and 40 caliber, 4.3-inch barrel, and it was only around until 2004. Now we get to this particular one. The model P95, introduced in 1996, is the first polymer frame receiver that Ruger had offered in this family of weapons. High-impact fiber-light plastic. And this was also, as we saw when we took it apart, the first to eliminate the drop-in link pin. Now, this particular one doesn't have the accessory rails, but there was a model of this that did have an accessory rail on it as well. And this particular pistol had a single-action trigger pull of 4.25 pounds, and it had a double action of 10.5 pounds. And again, the double action is not too bad on it, but that single action, the amount of take-up there is on that is just ungodly. The P97 45 chambered and 45 auto was a single-action 8+1. It was only made in decock only, made until 2004. And the last model that we're going to discuss in here is the model P345, which is a transitional between the P and the SR series. It has an 8+1 magazine, loaded chamber indicator, as well as a magazine disconnect, which means if the magazine was dropped out, the gun couldn't fire, which we all know how popular those were with Smith & Wesson. Their entire 59 series all had that 40 series. And that was something that was never liked. And there was even a way that you could disconnect that for law enforcement, because law enforcement didn't like it, even though the principle was that if somebody took your pistol, that you dropped the magazine, it couldn't be used against you. But the other problem was if you were changing magazines in the heat of a battle, that if the target came out in front of you, you couldn't engage that target because the magazine was out, and that was considered dangerous. And again, one of them had a 1913 rail, and that did not last too long until 2013. Well, we're going to take this to the range now. We're going to see how it shoots. Well, as you're going to see, this pistol had some major problems. As you can see that we had failures to fire. What was happening was, after it was taken apart and looked at, was the spring that lifts up on the trigger bar, which is what engages the disconnector. The spring wasn't lifting up the trigger bar, so it wasn't disengaging and re-engaging. So the disconnector wasn't functioning properly. You get off a couple of rounds, that's pretty much it. I can't say that it was normal. This is the first time I've ever saw it. I can't tell you how many, probably hundreds of these over a 10-year time period that I had test fired. And I never had any issues with that. One time we ever really saw any issues with certain hollow points it didn't like. I never really had a problem with reliability, but generally mostly what was used in these things was ball ammunition. So overall, as a crime pistol, these are sort of unique because they left a very unique signature. When you on the back of the breech face of the cartridge case, this is one of the things that when we would look at these images on Drugfire and Nibin, you'd be able to see a specific firing pin circular. You would see the firing pin drag on there. 100% of the time, you would see a drag from the unlocking with the firing pin being forward. You'd have a shear mark, which is where when the barrel would drop down, the breech face would scrape on the primer, and you'd see a little bit of a shear. It was a very specific signature that it left on there. Was it always that? No, but it was one that you could look at and say, okay, we're looking for a gun that could possibly be a Ruger series pistol. So it was relatively unique. The rifling was 6 right. It wasn't anything that was special, but we did see them. Now, overall, the pistol, again, the working man's pistol. It was something that was designed for lower income, that you could still have a somewhat reliable pistol. Never achieved any popularity, law enforcement or military. They tried for military. As I said, it failed horribly. Now, the newer SR series, much nicer. Those are more suitable for law enforcement use than these ever were. But if you look at the time frame that we were looking at, this was competing against Beretta, SIG, Glock, HK, even Taurus. These were sort of the same price point as where Taurus was, and Taurus was even a better pistol. But for the price for a first pistol, you really couldn't beat it. They were very good for us in law enforcement because they were very easily traceable due to the fact that they all left their individual signatures. They had a class characteristic that we could pick up very easily on the screen to know that there's a good possibility we were looking for a Ruger P-Series pistol. So we do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you please click like, please subscribe, even better share.